Now, highway, since we're, as I mentioned here, talk about impaired driving a little bit, is that something NTSB has looked into, is impaired driving?
If you actually look at the number of lives that are lost, most people lose their lives on our roadways, over 30,000 people a year. And 1/3 of those are related to impaired driving. And so the NTSB really focuses on all modes, but when you're looking at where the most lives could be saved, it's on our roadways.
And what's some of the leading causes for those roadway deaths?
Well, 1/3 of them, for over 15 years, have been related to alcohol and substance impaired driving. So why that's relevant is we know of those 30,000 plus lives that are lost every year, 10,000, in fact in 2011 it was 9,878 people, 10,000 of them are related to alcohol and substance impaired driving. And the concern has actually been that in the past there was significant progress where not only did the number go down, but we were just seeing fewer crashes and really significant progress. The concern has been for 15 years, 31% of the deaths on the roadways have been related to impaired driving. And so that's our concern. Basically, the United States has become complacent, accepting basically 10,000 people a year losing their lives to impaired driving. And that's been for over 15 years now.
Well, you said the percentage has been the same for about 15 years. So we're getting better at making cars safer, making roads safer, but we're not making a difference in the percentage or the change of the public stopping and drinking and driving.
And this is a critical point because most people think, oh, drinking and driving, drunk driving, it's been fixed. They think I know what a designated driver is and there's not a problem anymore. There's a huge problem, and part of that is because for 15 years, that 30% of roadway deaths are related to alcohol impaired driving. That's been going on for a long time. And yeah, cars are safer, it's easier to survive certain things, a lot more technology, but this basic challenge of getting people not to drink and drive remains a pretty significant problem for our entire society.
Well, and you mentioned the concern that we've become complacent with this whole thing. How do we change that?
And I think that's really what the focus needs to be right now. This is a big problem. It has remained a big problem. The NTSB hadn't really been particularly active in this area for over 10 years. So the last safety recommendation that was issued was over a decade ago. And when you think about for 15 years having that plateau of deaths, a lot of action needs to take place. And the biggest thing is to deal with the complacency, and part of that is to let people know this is not solved. We're losing too many people every year. And besides the roughly 10,000 lives that are lost, we have easily 170,000 injuries every year, of which 27,000 of those are debilitating or life-changing. So we are talking just about a huge effect on somebody we know. There's a friend or family member that's been touched by this, and it's been going on way too long.
Well, we'll come back to a little bit more of that as far as what people can do in their own lives, and have some things that maybe we can talk about for them in a few minutes here. But let's get to the recommendations. And you mentioned NTSB for many years had not been involved with this area very much. It was out there, but not pushing it. What's it doing now?
After really a decade of having a recommendation just hanging out there with some action going on, but clearly not enough, the NTSB took a year and 5 activities to really re-energize and refocus on this issue. So those activities included a 2-day forum, had 8 different panels and 37 panelists. We had a wrong way driving study. We have a most wanted list, and this is on the most wanted list. We had a safety study that was done. So there were 5 different activities, and out of those 5 activities, 19 new safety recommendations have been issued. And they really cover a diverse range of issues. One thing we know is there's no magic bullet here. And so one of the things I do like to highlight is it took 5 activities and 19 new safety recommendations that are really focused on the range of things that need to get done for us to reach zero. 0 crashes, 0 deaths, and 0 injuries.
So that's your goal, NTSB, is 0 deaths.
And that really was the focus of the activities. I mean, we started with the forum basically was reaching 0, the actions that are needed to get to 0, which meant 0 crashes, deaths, and injuries. And I think when you think about it, there was a lot of discussion. Are we ever going to get to 0? Is that even practical? And frankly, around this issue, I don't think you can have any other objective except the elimination of this issue. And that's where every piece of effort we put in to get that as low to eventually 0.
Later on, about a year later after that forum, you came out with a number of recommendations, or as far as the board did. How many recommendations? What in general do they cover?
So I think it's important to highlight our 5th activity, which was a safety study, was actually released on the 25th anniversary of the Carrollton, Kentucky accident.
What's that?
So that was 25 years ago in May 14th, was the worst alcohol-impaired driving accident in the United States. There was a driver with a .28 blood alcohol level who hit a school bus that was carrying a church group. And of the 27 people who lost their lives, 24 were kids, and many seriously injured. And it still is today the worst alcohol-impaired driving crash in the United States. And so on that anniversary, 25 years later, we issued a safety study that looked at the kind of countermeasures that are needed to help us reach 0. And that really was the cap to our year. It really, 10 new recommendations, giving us a total of 19.
So there's 19 recommendations. You said a couple times, comprehensive approach. There's no silver bullet here?
Well, and that's one of the problems, actually, is that people think, I got a problem, tell me how to fix it. And they think it's going to be one line. So people are looking for a magic bullet. It does not exist. And that's just because we have too many different people, too many different circumstances, too many different kinds of countermeasures. There's no one thing that's going to work for everybody. And so you really need a range of different kind of countermeasures and interventions that you can use for this kind of situation. And I bring this up because a lot of times people say, if you look at the big numbers, there's a lot in the repeat offenders. Unfortunately, if somebody loses their life from a drunk driver, and there's some impaired driving as part of that, it doesn't matter if it's the first time that's ever happened to them in a social setting, or they're a repeat offender however much, that individual has lost their life in that crash. And so you really need to look at the full range of the kind of circumstances and what it's going to make a difference for this full range of people that are involved in these situations.
One of the things I know NTSB does, and you mentioned it here already, is make recommendations to NHTSA or to states, and say, and you have the 19 recommendations in this case to various organizations and to state entities or the federal government, so to speak. What about John Q. Citizen or Jane Q. Citizen that's out there? We tell them don't drink and drive, obviously. I mean, that's standard. But is there more that they could be doing to make a difference here, to change things?
This is so important because while all the policy and all the other science and discussions get bandied about and sort of discussed about change, it really comes down to individual behavior and individuals' actions and decisions. And yes, it's very straightforward, actually, which is you do not want to mix drinking and driving. And first, you got to be very clear. It's kind of like, you want to drink. That's not what the issue is here. It's the mixing of that drinking or drug use with the driving. And so what can a person do? There's a full range of things. One is just don't mix. Go out, party all you want, just don't get behind the wheel after you've done that. And that means just make other arrangements, whether that's staying somewhere else. There are a lot of programs now where cabs and other kinds of things can actually help. So you make a phone, in fact, over certain holidays, they're no cost. You make a phone call, they'll take you home. Designated drivers are for this. It's really just plan ahead. If you know you're going to go and party and have fun, go right ahead and do it, but make a plan so that you separate any drinking from driving. That really, anything somebody does to make that separation, they've got an answer. I mean, that's how straightforward it can be.
And then work with their friends and family to follow through with that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, that's part of it, which is have a plan and then follow through. And so if there's in fact, one of the problems is just recently some data came out that like 40% of designated drivers have been drinking as well. This is not acceptable. And again, it's very straightforward, right? Do not mix the drinking or the use of drugs with the driving. And so you got a plan, designated driver, the phone number you're going to call for the taxi service, you're going to stay somewhere, whatever the plan is, just make sure you follow through.